Tonight I'm going to tell you a story. It's not a bedtime story, so don't get too excited if you're about ready for bed, but it's a story that I've carried with me in my memory as a very, what would we say, a very poignant happening in my youth that I've thought back on. And anyway, the reason I've chosen to look back on it, and I'll do that as best as my memory serves me to do so. But the reason I've decided it might be worthwhile is that it taught me some lessons and gave me some experiences that I probably wouldn't have been able to gain any other way, and yet it was kind of hard at the time. You've had hard things, I'm sure, so you'll identify, but you're not the only one, and we together aren't the only ones, and there are others facing circumstances that are, when I look at them anyway, I think, oh man, that would be intolerable for me. But I had an experience that was a little hard for me as a kid to get over. I'll tell you what it is. It starts with a cow. Actually, it starts with an idea. An idea that I should maybe take 4-H. The county agents organized 4-H programs in our area, in our county. And I just lived out in a rural area on a dairy farm, but there were opportunities for even us, so we had to travel a bit to get involved in 4-H. And as I was trying to think back to the age I would have been, it would have been, I think, during my 10th year. But anyway, I decided to join the 4-H dairy program. I thought that seemed logical since it was offered by a gentleman it's about 3 miles down the road. And he had a dairy farm and had been a successful dairyman. And I lived on a dairy farm, and it just seemed kind of natural for me to gravitate toward that as a potential 4-H class offering that I could get involved in. So I did. Well, one of the first things you had to do was to get a project calf. And so my dad helped me pick out a project calf. And I think the hope was that the 4-H program would kind of prepare people to get involved and go forward with other things and kind of further their interests. But I picked out a dairy calf with the help of my father. Actually, I think my father played the biggest role in it. I think part of the reason he did was because, if my memory serves me right, there was a period on our dairy farm where we had our own herd. We had our own herd bull, and they were, I don't know if you knew it or not, but Holstein bulls, unlike some kinds of beef breed bulls, Holstein bulls, as they got older, would get mean and they'd chase you and could really do you some damage if they caught up to you. So the standard practice back in those days was, if you had a Holstein bull and you wanted to keep him subdued and keep him from getting too frisky and chasing you down and clobbering you or killing you, was to get him in a chute and put a chain hanging down from his nose with a clasp, and if he got running a little bit too fast, why, it kind of took his excitement and put it in a different direction, and you get the point, I guess. But anyway, that's what we did. And there was a time, because of that, my dad, maybe somebody had told him or he read up on it, I don't know, but he kind of figured that if we needed some mixed genetics in our in our herd of cattle. And for a little while, even though it was expensive, he had someone who was trained in artificial insemination come in and inseminate some of our better cows. And my dad's hope was that then the calves born to those cows would have different genetics and hopefully improved genetics, because you had to pay quite a lot to have that done. And I didn't pay much attention to it other than I was just aware of it, and it didn't go on very long because it was too expensive for us. But it played a part in my whole youth experience, because as it turns out, the calf that my dad picked for me was a heifer calf, and it was about I forget how many years old, but it was a year and a half or something like that, maybe a little older. It was old enough so that I needed to get a halter for it, and that halter had to have anyway, we used on the lead rope, we'd put it through a loop in the halter, and it hooked onto the other side of the halter, and we had a little chain in there, and when you cinched it up, it made the calf come to attention pretty fast. And if you tightened it up, he'd really know you were the boss, which was important because part of my job in the 4-H program was to teach them how to lead. I had to make sure they could be led around, and I think the goal was there that we could eventually get them in the county fair and show our stock over there, our 4-H projects. So this particular calf had some unique markings that were different than the others in our herd. It was mostly white. It's a Holstein, mostly white. And of course, Holsteins are black and white, so we had some with big spots and a black on them in different places, of course, different markings. But this particular one was mostly white with a few, how would I describe it, kind of speckled markings down its neck and onto its shoulders of black. But they weren't like blotchy marks. They were more of a jagged, smaller variety of marks, some of them quite small. But it gave the calf a very distinct look when you compared it to the others in the herd, or the other cows even that we had. We didn't have any like that. And it had come out of its father was one of these artificial insemination bulls, and the bull was called H. I'll never forget the name of it. For some reason, it just sticks with me because of the experiences I had. But it was called H-21. Now that seems like an odd name to call a cow, but it was a bull. Bulls, they just identified by their numbers and letters, and so when you signed up to have that particular bull be the daddy bull, should we say, some of the cows in your herd, we just referred to that as an H-21. Well, when I got into the 4-H program, our leaders, his first name was Marvin. I won't give you all the names, but because of privacy, and I don't know that it's necessary, but he was about 2.5 miles down the road. And so when it came to time for 4-H club meeting, we'd drive to the house and have our meetings. And he's kind of a quiet guy, but he was very well respected in the community. And he, like I said, was a successful dairyman. Their particular herd had been in the area for generations, and they had some high producers. In fact, he was one of the only areas, the only dairies in the area that sold what they called grade A milk at the time. Grade A milk is the kind that you used to eventually ended up in grocery stores for people to drink. The grade B milk would be used to make things out of that required milk, I guess is the way I'd say it. So anyway, it was a good experience for me. And I learned about genetics and different feed rations and sicknesses and how to take care of newborn calves and just and how to groom them for showing and like at the fair. And we were taught all those things and of course, all the while we were doing that, I was teaching this calf, which is a pretty good sized calf now. When we started into the spring of the year, it was more than a calf. It was more like a cow, a young cow. And I had taken pictures of it to show my 4-H leader. He didn't come out and look at it, as I remember, but I'd taken pictures of it, and he was aware that it had this H-21 sire for the bull, or for the calf, and that was born, and now it was my 4-H project. And he'd heard of the number. He'd heard of that bull. It was a famous bull. The offspring of that bull had some pretty good records that were quite impressive. And so occasionally he'd ask me about it, and I wondered why he was asking anyway. I always felt a little bit proud of that I had an H-21, H-21. And so anyway, it came time for us to get serious about taking the calf to the fair as our 4-H project calf. And I can remember this particular calf that it wasn't, like I said, it was more like a young cow now, because it was, as the summer went along, I could tell that this calf was pregnant and was going to have a baby calf. I didn't know how long, but I knew it was coming up later on in the summer. So I led the calf around and groomed it, and we had what they called a curry brush, and it would get all of the dirt out of the hair. And as we got a little closer to the time when we were going to actually take the animals to the fair, and now this cow that I had, we'll call her a cow now instead of a calf, because she was about ready to give birth to another youngster, a calf of her own. And anyway, I took really good care of her, and she got to where she would lead really quite easily. And I had somebody come out and show me how to, they'd use clippers. There's certain ways that you had to clip the calf's tail and around their head and different things, and get them ready to show at the fair. And so I felt like I was ready. So I took this calf to the fair, and of course I had help with people with trucks and cattle racks on the back that would help me get her. By the way, she never did have a name, as far as I know. I just always called her H-21, which I'm sure she didn't appreciate, because that's a bull, not a cow. But if I had to identify it, I'd just say H-21. And we got her ready, took her over to the fair, and I can remember a little bit about the fair experience. There was places there where you could wash them and soap them down and just really get every little spot of dirt out, because you had to show these cows in front of judges out in what they called the open class. And it was not just showing the cow, but it was showing your showmanship skills. You had to be able to know how to hold the cow's, chain and halter just right so she would hold her head up and make her back look straight and have her stand so that her feet were spread so that it would basically display everything that was good about that particular cow. And I can remember I did my very best, and I think I got a blue ribbon in the showmanship. But the cow herself, I think, took the reserve champion cow in that particular 4-H classification. Wasn't the highest honor, but it was the next highest. And I'm not sure why she didn't get the highest, because that was, in my mind, she was. But the fair lasted for 2 or 3 days, and we'd go over and just, that was my job, is to just really take good care of her. So as soon as we got the milking done in the morning, we'd go over there and try to get things ready for the different showmanship things and take fresh straw and lay down under her and all of that. Well, it was the third day of the fair. So we'd go over on like a Thursday night and then stay Friday and Saturday and then come home Sunday. But it was not on Thursday or Friday, but on Saturday morning when I went over to the fair to take care of her. Lo and behold, she had on her own, I guess, because we weren't around to help her, she had a baby calf. And it drew quite a bit of attention at the fair. There were always people going through the display barns, and then when they'd see this cow, and they could tell she just barely had a calf, they were always drawn to that and wondered how that timing turned out the way it did, because we were thinking she'd hold off till we got her home. But she didn't. She had the calf at the fair. And luckily, it was after the showing and all that had taken place. It was later. So it was just a matter of cleaning up and taking care of, making sure the calf got the colostrum milk in its system, which is the first milk out of the cow. And the cow was just beautiful, even if through all that, she was, and she had a straight line on her back. And they had what they called in these 4-H programs, they had what they call an ideal in each breed. So there was brown Swiss breeds and Ayrshire breeds, Holstein, Guernsey, Jersey, and there was an ideal picture that you'd look at when you wanted to look at a certain breed to see what they were supposed to look at. Well, in my mind, again, in my mind, she was as close to that perfect cow as I can imagine. Did little different markings, of course, because of this bull that we had. But she drew some attention, and while I was over at the fair, especially after she'd had this calf, and of course, when they have a calf, you have to get them and start milking them and taking care of the milk, and because it's on its way and you can't stop it once it comes. So we were glad that it was about time to take them home that night. But before I could take them home, as I remember it, there were 3 different people that had walked through the barn. And these 3 people were all dairymen from the county, different parts of the county. And 3 different dairymen approached me and asked me, either me or else through my dad, one of us, they would ask us if we would be willing to sell that cow to them. And the reason they wanted that cow was because they were well enough acquainted with the different breeds and this particular bull that they used for artificial insemination, this H-21 bull. And they knew the kind of markings that bull would throw in his posterity. And they recognized the markings on that cow. And they knew exactly which bull that cow had come from. And like I said, there were some pretty good records behind that particular animal because they were almost perfect to conformation wise, and they gave tons of milk, and their udder was uptight under them and yet held a lot of milk. There's a lot of different things. I won't go into all of what you evaluate a cow on. But let me tell you the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would sometimes say. The rest of the story is we took the bull home. Since she had calved now, we put her in with the regular cows that came in to be milked. And we would milk her. And since she was now my cow, bless my dad's heart, he figured, and my mom's, they figured out a way that I could take some ownership and not mix it up with their other milk and still keep track of it. So we had barn scales hanging, the kind that you could hang from like a nail or whatever. And then you had a hook on the other end, and you'd milk the cow, and you'd put it in a bucket or whatever, and then you'd weigh the milk, and then you could weigh the bucket, and you could find out how much actual milk weight there was in that bucket from that cow. And so it was a little awkward, and we had to go kind of roundabout and make sure that we took care of that every time the cow was milked. But my dad told me that I could keep the milk from that cow and call it my own. And I was pretty excited about that. I felt like an entrepreneur of sorts, a real businessman. Yeah, one cow. And anyway, so he did that, and it didn't take too long because that cow had, true to her reputation through this H-21 bull, was giving some pretty hefty milk, more than most of the cows that we owned. I think there was one other cow that would outperform her, and another one that would come close. But after we'd milked her for a while and fed her and grained her and all that, she really started to produce some milk, and I started to accumulate a little bit of funds into my account, and there you go. I started being a businessman. And at this point, I didn't even have to keep track of the grain or the hay that I had to feed her because I helped with the other cows, and my dad just kind of threw that in with the mix, I guess. He's kind to me. So it was an experience that I've never forgotten, and it was a joyous experience. But it wasn't the whole experience. The fair takes place in August, and it was probably early October. One day I came home from school, and I can remember for some reason when I came into the house, my mother was just right there at the door waiting for me, which she normally didn't do. She just waited till I came in, and she'd say hi, and she'd be cooking or whatever. She was right there at the door waiting for me. And when I came through the door and up a step, she held onto my arm, as I remember it, and gave me this serious look like, I've got something to tell you, and she did have something to tell me. And what she told me just kind of rocked me to the core. What she told me is that my prize dairy cow had gone over into the field with the other cows, and my dad had turned them out, and at that time of the year there was a little third crop hay that would come up, and they'd use that so he didn't have to start feeding them hay too early in the year. Well, this third crop hay was noted for bloating, and you can guess the rest of the story. My mother told me that my cow had bloated and died. and that they had found her in the field dead. So I've tried to put myself in her situation and see what that might have felt like for her to tell me that news. I'm sure it was really hard. And probably the next question you had is, well, how did I react? And I can tell you, yeah, really, it was like, I've heard some people say it was like you got punched in the gut. Well, it's that kind of a feeling. You just got punched in the gut hard. And I looked up at her. I knew she was telling me the truth, and there was nothing at this point that I could do about it now. And I knew what bloating was because we've had other animals bloat on the farm. And I knew what had happened when she said the word. And I can remember that I didn't even look at her because I just felt bad, and I ducked my head. And I think part of the reason I ducked my head is because maybe I didn't want to see the pain on her face either. And I didn't want to look at her. And so I kind of ducked my head, and I just stood for a minute in kind of a stupor. And then I can remember I just went into the bedroom. We only had one bedroom that wasn't our parents' bedroom. I can remember going into that bedroom and just throwing myself up on the bed with my face in the pillow and sobbing uncontrollably. I just felt so bad. It really rocked my world at that time. I was so proud of that cow, and that I had an H-21 cow, and how everybody wanted her, and they'd offered me this money. At the time, they offered me $250. Well, $250 back then was a lot of money. I know it's cheap now. I mean, you won't hear that, but in those days, $250 for a milk cow was a lot of money, and I turned it down because I didn't want somebody to buy my dream out from under me. And now just that third crop hay had taken the dream right out from under me. I didn't really blame anybody. I just knew that it hurt. So from that point forward, I eventually just, I guess, run out of tears or whatever. And I tried not to make it so loud that people would hear, because it's just kind of me in the pillow. But I'm sure my mother felt it, even though she didn't say much by way of consolation. She'd pat me on the shoulder and squeeze my arm and try to make me feel better that way, and let me feel her support, which I did. But there was nothing that could be done. So let me just bounce ahead now. Say 6 weeks. Because my dad, whenever a cow died, he'd just drag it down to the bottom part of the field. And we didn't bury them because we didn't have a front end loader or anything. We just drag them down there and let the coyotes and magpies go to work on them and see their bones the next year or whatever. And I didn't even go down that part of the field after that. So, but about 6 weeks later, my dad came to me and he said that my Uncle Worth, who's my dad's youngest brother, who also had a dairy farm over in the Paris area, had consented to give me, or to sell me, actually my dad, a replacement cow heifer that would hopefully take the place of this one that I had. And so I can remember going over eventually and looking at it. It was out in the pasture under some trees. And I looked at it, and right off the bat, I knew it wasn't going to match up to what I lost. It wasn't an H-21 heifer. And even I'd learned enough about the conformation of the animals that I knew it wasn't going to be very highly rated, or I didn't know if it would be a milk producer or whatever, but it was about ready to calve too. And I don't know what kind of conversation went on between my dad and my uncle, because I'm sure my uncle probably needed that calving heifer to add to his herd and keep him going. But somehow it ended up as my replacement. Well, I wasn't very satisfied with the replacement. I'll just be honest with you. And I suppose I showed that. But I kept, the cow eventually had a calf later on in the year. And in the early part of the spring, it had a calf and started milking, and I started, my dad made the same deal with me that I could keep the milk. And so I did, weighed it. The one thing that I can remember that has stuck with me also with all that is that the money that I earned, I don't know how much of a sacrifice it was for my parents to actually feed and grain that cow and then give me the money for it. I suppose it offset some of what they would have given me anyway. And I don't remember exactly how it came up, but my brother at the time, my second oldest brother, was on a mission in Germany. And we had to send him money every month. And somehow we started talking about things, and they were saying how much it cost, and I was weighing milk and seeing how much I'd earned, and it turned out that the conversation about my earnings and the cost to send my brother on the mission were similar in one of our calculations. I can remember volunteering that milk money to my brother to help pay for his mission. And I can even remember the amount. It was $65. And I didn't pay it every month, but I had an arrangement, as I remember it, to pay that much like every other month. And my brother was going to come home before too much longer, but that's what I did with some of the money, at least, that I made from this replacement heifer. And I've always, part of the reason I think I remembered is because my parents praised me. They praised me for being willing to work and then give the money that I'd earned from my work to help my brother, who was on a mission. And I don't know that it would have been so meaningful except for the praise and the reminder that I was doing a good thing and I was being unselfish. And as my life's played out, I've often wondered what the value of all of that experience was with the H-21 cow and the replacement heifer and my payment to my brother to help keep him on a mission for the church. And it was just a growing experience in my life. And it made me realize, as I've grown older and thought back on it, how important it is to have those kinds of experiences, those growing experiences, the downs and the ups. I was so up on that H-21 cow because I was so proud of the way she looked and what she won, and that everybody was paying attention to her and offering me money. I was just riding a cloud. Then all of a sudden, you're not riding a cloud at all. You're getting chunked right into the earth on your nose because of a bloat occurrence, and then the replacement heifer and all of that. Anyway, won't retell all that story, but it played a significant role in my life, and I think the reason I would like to at least draw your attention to it is that sometimes, like me, you never can quite get back what you had. But with other people's help, you can come close. And over time, you start to realize it's the help from my uncle, from my 4-H leader, from my parents, from different people that empathized with me and helped me. It's the help that seems to even the score and even enhances it. So be grateful if you got those kind of people in your life. And if you take a nosedive and feel like crying in your pillow for a good long time, just remember that the pillow could be washed and dried. And life just keeps going on. And it's a good life. A really good life. Even with all those ups and downs, some of which seem insurmountable. So, if that story helps you somewhere, or reminds you of something maybe that's already happened that is similar and different, maybe not with cows, but with different things, that it'll make a difference. And the important thing is keep being positive, keep holding your chin up, keep facing the wind, even though it's blowing right in your face. Keep facing the wind and break loose with a smile when the time's right. And if you're like me, it won't last too long. And you start to realize that there's lots of good people and good things, even after the bad ones that come along. So I hope that experience will serve you well, and maybe at least give you a Me Too experience because they're important. Realize that you're not the only one. Enjoy. Keep moving forward. Remember that you're loved. Remember that I love you. Whoever you are watching this. And all will be well. Good night.